This weekend, the readings are all focused so powerfully on hope, And yet, this was about the most hopeless week I've had in a long time because of a book I've been reading, which I would recommend to you, but not for the faint of heart. It is something. It's titled How Civil Wars Begin and How to Stop Them by Barbara F. Walters. And it's a powerful book. But before I get into that book, I want to say something about hope to start it. In the scriptures today, we hear in the first reading Jeremiah, and he's speaking about hope built around trust. And I have to preface this by saying, whenever we read the scriptures, we should be prepared not to be so literal and confined by the exact words, figure that they don't always mean exactly how they sound, and they always mean probably much, much more. So when Jesus says, if your eye is an occasion of sin, gouge it out, he doesn't mean that, literally. But he says it provocatively so that we would guard our eyes and be careful of what we look at and what we're going to take into our heart through our eyes. So he doesn't mean it quite literally, but he says it strongly so that we would take it in and go deeper and see what is it he's getting at. So it says, don't trust in man, only trust in God. Well, not really. I mean, husband and wife, here we are on World Marriage Day. If husbands and wives don't trust each other, what have you got? Of course you trust in one another. Of course your kids should trust your parents. But not ultimately, not with an eternal trust. That belongs to God alone. And when we ever hear the message and begin to open ourselves to this God that's eternal, all-knowing, always was, always will be, if we believe that, then there's a different kind of trust that is so profound that we have to get in touch with. And he says, it's like a tree planted near running waters, and the roots go way down deep, and they get this water, and they nurture it. Even in a drought, the leaves are forever green because they're nurtured. They trust in God. In the responsorial psalm, it repeats that same thing. And then Paul takes us to another place as he says, trust that. Hope in that cross. If you don't hope in that and believe that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, then our faith is in vain. That's where your hope lies. And we see in the cross the divine entering into humanity in the person of Jesus and proving the divinity, because on that cross he should have condemned everybody who did this to him. He should have hated them, but he didn't. But in the most divine way possible, he loved and forgave. And he gave to us a touch of eternity. It's like we reach out to God, but really God reaches out to us. And that's the meaning of that cross. So, to the book. Barbara Walter has been studying and teaching and learning about civil wars for years, about governments, how they fall, how they rise, what happens to them. And she, with a whole bunch of colleagues, have come up with like 10 steps that lead up to a civil war. And you could watch a society changing and what happens to them, their attitudes and all, and know when they're at the point where they're maybe going to cross a line and it might be inevitable that civil war is coming. And they've tracked so many countries around the world that have gone through this. One of the ones that was most notable, at least in my lifetime, was South Africa. South Africa was similar to our country, wealthy, and the difference was we had majority whites for so many years. They had a minority white always. They left Europe and went to South Africa and took over the land, took it away from the blacks, and then they ran the country. They didn't let the blacks vote. They couldn't live in white neighborhoods. They couldn't date or marry somebody who was white. They couldn't hold office. So what happened? The blacks got angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. They put Nelson Mandela in jail for, 27, 29 years, something like that. So Botha, the last president to hold on to this kind of government and this kind of way of living, he got voted out, and de Klerk came in, and he would win the Nobel Peace Prize as he let Mandela out of jail, and he would win the Nobel Peace Prize because the two of them committed to find a way to build their society back. And a lot of the impetus came from the business class, the whites, because they said, so what if we have all these businesses and all this money? If they burn down our businesses and take our money, what good is it? So it could have been a little self-serving, but in a way to protect themselves, they said, we got to negotiate. We got to make a different society. And so the doors began to open up. And South Africa was saved, really saved from the Civil War. Now, it takes some wisdom to maneuver through there. And I'm reading this book, and I tell you, about halfway through the week, I was just losing it. And then when I get really upset, I talk out loud like a crazy man. I just do. And I said, Perry Leiker, you're losing it. Perry Leiker, where's your hope? And I had to face myself in reading this book. If we were to come to a point of civil war, and there are so many among them myself who saw January 6th as a real crossing of a line, one that we've not crossed, one that is very similar to the first civil war in this country. But watching this and reading this, I said, Perry Leiker, even if we come to that point that you can't go out your front door because somebody might shoot you, and there are guns everywhere, by the way, in case you don't know this, everywhere. So I said, what happens? And do I live in a shell, or do I live my life and I might die for it? I might die. And I had to say, Perry Leiker, no, hope is in the Lord, not in people going to save my life or whatever. I got to hope in the Lord. And if I do that, something may change. Finally, I finished the book this morning, early. And I finally got to the positive, how do we prevent a civil war? And I hope to start a chapter here in the parish, because I really believe, just like those business leaders in South Africa and people who have a lot to lose, may be the ones who are most willing to negotiate. And then all of the leaders, religious leaders and business leaders and parents and teachers, maybe could grab on to what it is we need to do to rebuild in our neighborhood,
is an NFL
in our
town.
city, in
I don't
our
know
state,
if they're a Rams town. I don't think they
a
are right now.
democracy that works,
And obviously that played
for
out
people,
in an
and
unflattering way
preserves our
2 weeks
freedoms
ago in
and
the
our
NFC
lives.
Championship with all the Niners fans here.
So,
But, you know, I
in
mean,
that
people
context,
love football here.
we
People
have
watch
Jesus.
football. There's a dedicated
He's
culture. I mean, there's
out there
great
with his disciples
youth
teaching, and
programs,
he goes
great
out
high
on the
schools.
stretch of flat land.
You know,
He
quarterbacks
raises his
come
eyes
out of
to
here
them,
all the time
and he
in
says
Southern
these words that you
California.
heard in the introduction as well as in the reading.
And it's a real
Blessed
hotbed.
are the
So
hungry.
I think
Blessed
just
are the poor.
finding that
Blessed those who are
root,
mourning
right?
and
Finding
crying.
that, so tapping
Blessed
into
those
that level
who
of
don't have
excitement that
anything.
the town
Blessed are
already
you when
has
they
for
hate
the
you and insult
NFL
you and exclude you and
is kind of
persecute
key
you
for
in
the
my
Rams
name.
and keeping
Blessed
themselves
are you.
at the forefront
Well,
of NFL conversations.
again, I
That's
think
what's going to drive
it's
interest
not
in the
to
team. And
be just so simply
I'm really
literal.
interested
It's
to see
really
if they
much
can kind
more
of build off
profound
of
than
all the
that,
momentum they've
and it goes
gotten
much
by
deeper. And I think
amassing a
it's
star of
something
power,
like
by
this.
trading for Stafford, by
One
building
of the
SoFi Stadium, which
concepts that
thank
has
goodness
grabbed
this
my
year people have gotten a
spirituality
chance to
lot,
enjoy, right?
and I got it from Richard Rohr, but it's in
all
most
that
of
builds into a sense that
the
this
spiritual
franchise
writers of even
belongs here,
centuries
and they're going to be at the
past.
top of the
It's
league,
the idea of
and in those
liminal
conversations for years
space.
to come.
And liminal space, by definition, it's not this end or that end, but it's the stuff in the middle. So, for example, on this end, I think there's only 1% or 1.5% of our country who are billionaires. Is anybody a billionaire here? Please disclose. Is anyone close to being a billionaire? I don't think so. So we're not here, okay? But I hope and pray that as I say this, it's true that nobody in this church right now is homeless, but it could be. Those are two of the extremes, billionaire or homeless, but most of us, we're really all in this middle, in this liminal space. And what makes it liminal is that's where we're working out our stuff. That's where we're trying to figure it out and keep going. And this is where hope is so important. Because if we don't have hope, if we don't say, God, you're in this with us, God, you're going to grace me and bless me and get me through this, I will figure it out with your grace and love. If we don't engage hope here in this liminal space, what will happen? It's very easy to become hopeless and give up or give in. But to continue the struggle, the fight, the work, that's what it takes. I read, because I went and searched, because I like to find quotes and things that capture an idea. So I was very lucky in getting this one, and I'm glad I read on because it was pretty spicy, the beginning, but then this person got to this beautiful passage on hope. It's only this long. Hang in there with me. This is what they wrote about hope. Hope is not thinking positive thoughts. Hope is not self-delusion. Hope is clinging to the life raft and kicking even when there is no sight of land. Hope is a muscle. Like most muscles, it hurts like heck at first, but it gets easier as you get stronger. And you get stronger the more routine, seemingly pointless work you put into it. It is possible. It's not easy. It takes the sort of work every day of doing what needs to be done to care for yourself, your community, your society, even when you resent having to do so and would rather lie down for 5 minutes or 5 months or the rest of your life. That's hope. It's not a mood, it's an action. It's behaving as if there might be a future even when that seems patently ridiculous. That was a moment of hope. Who could hang on a cross and be insulted and be enduring such terrible suffering and rejection and ultimately dying and be hopeless? Somehow, Jesus proved that in the most hopeless situation, you can still hope and put yourself in the hands of God. I think today that we come to this, and it's wonderful, really, at the beginning, only the sixth Sunday of the Ordinary Time, the really beginning of this year of our liturgy, that we stop and pause to appreciate the gift of hope. What it would be like in our life if we didn't have it. And how important and essential it is to open ourselves to hope, to build hope in ourselves and with one another, and to create out of hope the possibilities that God puts in our path.